Hey, how's it going, everybody? Charlie Wilson here, aka Sinister Charlie. Welcome back. More Gigguk. Somebody suggested this in the comments that I'm guessing this is the video that they wanted because I haven't seen it. For obvious reasons. Everybody knows I'm not a huge fan of, sorry, huge fan of mecha anime. Not that they're not good, because they are. Just depends, honestly. I mean, I liked Big O. I was like, that's probably my favorite, and it's so like not like other mecha anime. Um, yeah, but I mean, Evangelion, I tried to watch. I don't know. I think it's just same thing with like isekai. It's like it's just kind of played out. It's not really anything new going on in the genre that I can see. Uh, but yeah, I liked Big O because it was like Batman with a big robot. So yeah, anyway, let's go ahead and like that just because. And yeah, let's get into it. This is a longer one, so.
When we think of objects that are synonymous with Japan and anime, not much can beat these symbolic metallic behemoths that have cemented themselves into history.
Yeah.
Mecha as a genre is one that's captured the hearts of fans for decades and has a history almost as rich and expansive as the medium of anime itself. Love it or hate it, there are a few things that
I don't
are as
hate it, I
iconic
just
for
am
anime,
different.
and even if you don't consider yourself a mecha fan,
Don't
it's
accuse
more than
me
likely
of
that
things
one
I
of your
don't
favorite
do,
series has its
Gigguk.
roots from this genre. In recent times, however, the sad reality is that whilst mecha by no means died out, it's not even close to being the medium-defining titan it once was. Sure, you may see a show or two pop up here and there, and Gundam has had its steady stream of shows seemingly forever, but nothing's.
First time I saw Gundam was on Toonami, and I really wasn't into it even back then. It was probably the first one I saw, and I was like, I take it or leave it. Yeah.
Really broken out from the sphere of the dedicated mecha fandom. How did such a genre titan fade from the mainstream anime consensus? What journey did this titular genre take to get here? With such a rich history, there's an interesting story to be told here. One so expansive, there's no way I can fit absolutely everything in this video, but I will try my best. So strap in your seatbelts, because it's going to be a long one, as it's a tale that dates back to the roots of anime itself. One that starts in the 1950s, on the back of a pretty big war that apparently the entire world got involved in.
But that's never happened.
Yeah.
Anime and other
It's
stuff.
impossible to talk about the roots of anime as we know it without mentioning the events of a bloke with a weird mustache deciding he hated the Jews one day and attempting to fight the entire world to prove that.
I don't know about
and
that.
more importantly,
I don't know
the
about that
aftermath
guy.
from it. Given how much an event like 9/11 influenced modern media today, you can only imagine how huge a cultural impact of having two massive bombs dropped on your country would be. And this was certainly reflected in the stories that would be largely credited for the birth of anime and mecha. Mighty Atom, better known to us in the West as Astro Boy,
I didn't know it was called
certainly
Mighty
the
Atom.
series with the greatest cultural significance of its time. Osamu Tezuka's manga first began publishing in 1952, just a few short years after the climax of World War II, and heavily features themes of peace and understanding between all nations, born in part of Tezuka's experience and hatred for war and nuclear weaponry. Astro Boy may not have even been close to what we consider mecha by modern standards, being a story about a fully sentient android, but the messages it spread and the culture it created would lay the groundwork for what would soon come to follow it. For the series that can without a doubt be credited as being the first in the genre of mecha would soon begin publishing in 1956. A story about a 10-year-old boy being given a remote control of a 60-foot robot by his father, a super weapon created by the Japanese army in a fictional Pacific War. Tetsujin 28 Go can truly be considered the grandfather of mecha and the progenitor of super robots.
I never saw this.
Much like Tezuka with Astro Boy, Yokoyama's experience living through the Second World War was one of the driving inspirations for him to create this mechanical monster, with one of his other key influences being in the 1931 Frankenstein film, and his reasons for applying that idea to this work fundamentally describes one of the biggest things mecha stands for as a concept. The monster, machine, or nuclear weapon is not in and of itself good or evil. The evil lies in the intent of the creator and how it's used. These are cultural phenomenon that would set the precedence not just for anime.
Wouldn't that be kind of like sort of, I guess Iron Giant would have gotten its inspiration from that as well?
but Japan's wider culture. As a nation now intertwined with technology, robotics, and automation, you can see where this interest sparked from and how integral these stories are to capture the consensus of a war-torn nation. And this would continue on into the 70s, as the interest in giant robots would only increase. The super robot boom ago may have laid the groundwork, but the 70s saw the floodgates open with numerous ideas being introduced for the very first time that would become the defining tropes of the
Sex
genre.
robots.
And right to the forefront was Go Nagai, the same man who everyone decided to start paying attention to again thanks to his influential work being adapted in Devilman Crybaby.
Oh,
As far
I haven't
as
seen
Mecha is
Devilman
concerned,
Crybaby.
however, there's arguably none more important than his implementation of the
clips.
very first
Looks
time a
alright.
series depicted a robot being piloted from inside the machine itself. Mazinger Z took what Tetsujin had begun and firmly
Never heard of
defined
it.
what super robots meant as a genre.
Serious, I've
as
never heard
before
of
this, the robots were either sentient beings as with Astro Boy and Giant Robo, or in Tetsujin's case, it was controlled remotely with a handset. For what may seem like an obvious and unimportant development to some, the matter of the fact is this is part of the criteria we now use to define what a mech actually is. A humanoid machine being piloted from within. This new idea firmly established what would define this decade. This was the era of giant mechanical superheroes rocket punching, hand drilling, and chest lasering their way through a week-on-week assembly line of evil villains and monsters. The shows that came along to capitalize on the popularity and development brought about by the likes of Mazinger Z and Getter Robo began to define the episodic Monster of the Week format we're so familiar with in anime. It was a decade of brightly colored mecha shows for children, and thus began the other aspect that would go hand in hand with the genre: merchandising. Every single one of these shows was marketed from the ground up with the intent to sell robot toys to kids.
Yeah, that's the way I view mech. A lot of mech anime is that way. It's the same thing with Power Rangers and everything else mech related. It's and it's the same thing in most cartoons back in the 70s and 80s and 90s. Well, even to today, but at least now they have kind of better stories with them and better animation. The animation, if you go look back at Sailor Moon, it is terrible animation. For today, even back then, I guess, I don't know. It's weird. I feel like they were making better, there's better animation back then, but maybe I'm wrong. It's possible. Anyway.
And it was this aspect that would decide whether or not a show was successful. This factor would stick with the genre to this day, and merchandising would become a huge driver of what mecha has become today. Thus, of course, with so many shows coming out year on year, building themselves on the ideas that came before them, it wouldn't take long until the super robot genre started to become stale and monotonous. The audience were hungry for something new, setting the stage for something big to happen. And while some aspects of sci-fi and technology branched off with iconic shows like Leiji Matsumoto's Space Battleship Yamato, opening up the space opera genre, something needed to happen to completely revolutionize what defines mecha. Turns out this would come from an up-and-coming director by the name of Yoshiyuki Tomino. As in April of 1979, the mecha world was introduced to the game changer that defines game changers.
It's Gundam,
an entirely new
I'm
genre
guessing.
within mecha was about to make huge waves in the industry, and nobody was ready for the phenomenon that we would still feel to this day. To say that Mobile Suit Gundam was an important series is a bit of an understatement, akin to saying the universe is fairly large, or I am quite fond of tsunderes. This would spawn the real robot genre.
I could take
depicting
tsunderes
machines
or
as
leave them.
true tools of war, essentially tanks with legs instead of mechanical supermen. It was the very first anime to depict a fictional human-on-human war to this level, as throughout the decade previous, it was always monsters or evil alien races opposing the heroes. Gundam was the exact antithesis to this idea, for whilst you were firmly experiencing the war from one side's perspective, the motivations and goals of all parties involved were purely justified. This moral ambiguity was completely unheard of at the time, as was the concept of a young civilian protagonist being thrust into a world he didn't understand. Sound familiar to any anime you've seen recently? The mature themes were a huge departure from the kid-friendly super robots. So much so, in fact, that initially the show was cut short and ended up a commercial failure in many respects. As with before, merchandising is a huge driver for mech shows. Hell, the only reason why the very first Gundam was depicted in its iconic color scheme of red, white, blue, and yellow was for the sake of merchandising, and kids just weren't incentivized to buy it. It wasn't until the film compilations had finished screening in 1982 that it gained the recognition it deserved with merchandising that was targeted towards an older audience in Gunpla. Once that happens though, oh boy, were people fully aware just how much—
Yeah, because generally you don't see Gundam toys, you just see models. Yeah, but kids are like models too, but it's mostly the people I see with Gundam models are adults. I don't see a whole lot of kids making models these days. Maybe autistic kids. I don't know. I don't know how that works. Anyway.
Much of a big deal Gundam was, and it firmly stood to have exactly the same effect on real robots that Mazinger Z had on super robots.
I used to do plane models.
Unlike the 70s though, the more mature subject matter and serial nature of real robot narratives meant that all manner of shows got to present fresh and compelling ideas. The established tropes of super robot anime were rapidly phasing into live action Sentai, leaving in its place what is truly considered to be a golden age of mecha. This era saw the rise of such incredible franchises as Dougram, Votoms, Pat Labor, and most notably of all outside of Gundam, Super Dimension Fortress Macross.
Oh, Macross.
Shoji Kawamori would soon
I have a
become
couple of
hugely
Macross
impactful
DVDs
figure
still.
and icon within the mecha world, but what a way to make a name for himself with this show. Perhaps and somewhat unfortunately though, depending on who you ask, there was a key theme featured in Macross that would go on to have a very important relationship with mecha in future years. That being the integration of motherfucking idols. Yes, that's right. Trace it back far enough and you can find some of the roots to idol shows in mecha anime. Mecha was the defining genre for anime in this time, but towards the end of the decade, like when the hot trend was super robots, a similar lull in quality was beginning to set in as a result of the oversaturation of real robots jumping on the Gundam bandwagon. The landscape was once again ready for a change, and just before the 80s ended, an up-and-coming animator by the name of Hideaki Anno joined the fray with his directorial debut, Gunbuster. As well as being an absolutely fantastic
I've heard of
series
Gunbuster.
overall, Gunbuster was a firm sign of things to come with its successful blend.
Yeah, there's a lot of recent stuff about Gunbuster that's come out. I think, is there a new one or something? Or it might not be. I don't know. It seems like one that you'd reboot. But yeah, I've seen some clips of Gunbuster.
Of classic super robot motifs with modern serious story elements and characterization. This fusion of ideas would soon go on to define the future of the genre. As we go on into the 90s, mecha would transition into somewhat of an identity crisis. The biggest thing to differentiate the 90s to previous decades was that mecha didn't stick to a particular trend, and it was an incredibly experimental and varied time.
Oh my god, I remember
this. A
this.
cocktail of fresh takes on classic genres
that
and
anime?
completely new concepts to firmly establish how limitless the idea was from a story
Yeah,
perspective. Gundam saw new and original takes between the likes of G Gundam being the franchise's first take on super robots to 8th MS Team, perhaps being the greatest, most down-to-earth example of definitive real robots combat to date. It was clear the gloves were off for mecha at this point. The likes of Gal Gaigar brought super robots back into the public eye in a big way, and Shoji Kawamori's biggest hit since Macross in Escaflowne with its fantasy isekai setting pushed the limits of what people expected from the genre.
Sure I've seen
Even
a
through
couple
all this,
episodes
however,
of that.
1995 would prove to be the defining year of this decade, with two of the biggest and most important shows this genre has ever seen, hitting screens not only in Japan but for the West as well. Gundam Wing was my generation's gateway into mecha. Thanks to its successful Toonami run, it was everything as far as
I
mecha
remember
in the
it on
West was
Toonami.
concerned.
I never watched
I'm sure
it,
many
but
of you will have
maybe
this
an
show
episode.
in particular to thank for introducing you into the genre. But of course, whilst it was still popular in Japan, its impact was borderline irrelevant compared to that of Hideaki Anno's career-defining icon of this medium.
Yeah. I never got into Evangelion.
Be considered the de facto
I watched like 2 episodes and I could not get behind the main character. Shinji is such a bitch. I can't do it. Not in good conscience anyway. I don't know. I know it's good. It's just I think I saw like the first episode, maybe the second one, and I was like, all right, yeah, it's funny. It had I can't say it's not bad. Obviously, I can't say that. It's just Shinji's such a bitch.
A game changer
That's
for
all.
Mecha, then Neon Genesis Evangelion would prove to have an impact of a similar scale. but to the entire medium of anime. It's hard to pinpoint specific aspects of Eva that would go on to define the future of mecha as a genre. It didn't do what Mazinger Z and Gundam did and start some kind of boom of Eva clones across the following decade. It simply became a bastion for otaku culture as a whole. It revolutionized the medium as we know it today, and ironically enough, while for once the merchandising wasn't the main point to its initial success, it has become arguably the most commercialized franchise in Japan, doing for the Japanese what Star Wars did for the West. To boil down Eva's influence to just a few points would entirely undersell the impact this series had. I could go on for hours about exactly what it did for anime, but that's a topic for another video, and we're here to talk about one genre. As the true deciding element of what Eva did for mecha is the simple fact that it showed to a mass audience that you do not need to be a mecha fan at heart to enjoy a series with giant robots in it. Yes, we can point at the slimlined biomechanical designs that differed from everything that came before them, how it took from the established aspects of mecha while subverting a lot of them, but the genre conventions of mecha were not
it's like supposed to be like a bio robot or
it was simply a component of its brilliance. It's made people who weren't fans of the genre pay attention to it. It pushed for the genre to be one that wasn't defined by its pre-established
a lot of Christian iconography.
It's Eva that allowed for many fan favorites that have come since to be noticed and loved by everyone, a lot of which aren't even mecha shows. Mecha was no longer just a Monster of the Week battle series. It was no longer just political-driven war stories or a combination of the two. It was none of those things. It was all of those things and so much more. So what came next was what I could only describe as the modern golden age of the genre.
Big O.
The 2000s wasn't a period of development or progress for the genre. It was simply a period of pure fulfilling payoff for everything Mecha had given us over the last 30 years. Mecha fans just wanted great shows, great stories, and great characters, and that's exactly what they got. Shows like Razafon parading Ava's influence in space to great success, Full Metal Panic masterfully blending real robots with high school comedy.
Forgot about Full Metal Panic. That was actually good. I liked that show. And Full Metal Panic for Mofo, which didn't have mechs in it, but it was just, romantic comedy type thing. I really did like both those shows. So I guess I do like I like another show, another mecha show.
In the past. Hell, love it or hate it, and chances are it's the latter. Gundam Seed was a big fucking deal in terms of overall popularity. The
I remember this being
Evangelion films were just starting. Gunbuster's eventual sequel and Diebuster brought back super robots, and this would all peak in 2007 with the release of two shows that to this day stands as Mecha's last big hurrah in the wider anime consensus.
Just who the hell do you
Gurren Lagann, huh? I never saw Gurren Lagann.
Gurren Lagann wasn't just a big show. It was a galaxy-sized, fandom-wide phenomenon of the times that appealed to and was loved by just about everyone back then.
Yeah, I've never seen it, but
to
people...
this day. This was the exclamation mark on the end
people
of
say
an
it's
iconic
good.
lineage of the
I
super
probably
robot
should
genre,
watch it.
and it captured the hearts of a generation of fans who probably hadn't even heard of any of the shows that inspired
and it's
it to
Gainax,
be.
so...
It remains to this day one of the defining shows in the modern anime generation.
I think it's Gainax.
And with that said, it's amazing to think that
and
it
I
might
like
not
Gainax,
even been the biggest mecha show of that year.
Oh yeah, that I've never seen
Code Geass.
Code Geass, yes, thank you.
Gave us a true to its roots super
I never saw Code
Geass.
Geass.
Geass gave us a true to its roots political real robot series and breathed new life into a genre that had previously just been dominated by the Gundam franchise. Loudly exclaiming to new fans, here's what's cool about the genre. These shows weren't popular because they were mecha shows. They were popular in spite of that, and they made people into mecha fans.
The C4 is delicious,
legacy of everything from Tetsujin through Mazinger
that blue
Z, Mobile Suit Gundam, Evangelion, and beyond had a huge payoff over these few short years. This golden age, however, would be short-lived. For as we move on now, just over 10 years later, mecha simply has not flourished in the same way since.
Yeah, I haven't really seen a whole lot of stuff popping up for Mecha.
So here we are today.
Except the newest
gradual decline
Gundam.
of a genre that was once the juggernaut of this medium. Now, I'm by no means saying there haven't been any great series over the last 10 years, but it should be clear to everyone by now that mecha is nowhere near as prevalent as it used to be. Gundam has been reduced to OVAs which mainly appeal to the hardcore fans, with Iron-Blooded Orphans failing to garner the mass appeal it really needed. The small amount of new original IPs have fallen flat, even though the likes of Star Driver, Captain Earth, Aldno Zero, Knights of Sidonia, and Valve have tried, none have come close to succeeding. And if you're a dedicated Mecha fan, the chances are that you've become a minority in the modern anime community. How did this happen? It would be easy to say that trends come and go, and in a genre that is 60 years old now, there is little room for something new and innovative. But now, having looked through its rich history, I believe the problem could run deeper than that, and there are two main points I want to address. Firstly is the current landscape of our time. Mecha found its roots from the impact of World War II, and because of this, war has always been a prevalent theme in the genre. War against an oppressor, war against an unknown entity, the moralities of war. It's something that we as humans have had to deal with throughout our history, but right now, war isn't at the forefront of the general consensus. Relatively speaking, we're in a more peaceful time without the worry of war, Twitter dick measuring contests about nuclear weapons aside, and in its place are the fight for social political issues or localized tragedies. War stories just don't.
I'd say, I know this was made like 2 or 3 years ago, but wait a couple years. I'm sure something will happen. World War III, and all that good stuff. I feel bad for this next generation.
Captivate us as much as they used to, and grand epic mecha warring plot lines have less of a place in this time. Not only that, but the landscape of anime itself has changed. We are in a time of the seasonal, competitive, hard-hitting 13-episode anime series, and for a genre that generally likes to tell compelling epic tales that require the time investment of developing a large cast and building a rich world, it's hard to compete. Fact of the matter is, you'd usually need at least 25 episodes to tell a decent mech story, with 50 episodes being the optimal, and for this many episodes to be planned and approved from the get-go is becoming increasingly rare in this day and age, and even rarer if you want to do it for a new IP, not forgetting that it still has to compete with every other seasonal anime.
Vinland
meaning
Saga
if it
does
doesn't grab an audience in the first 3 episodes, it'll likely be a flop.
I was going to say this new season, the second season of Vinland Saga, has been doing it really well. And the first season they released 25 episodes, I think. And this one, it's going to be probably same thing, 25, 26 episodes. And the second season, the Farmland arc especially, I've read the manga. You need that to tell that you can't do 13 episodes and then just take a break with that kind of show, because it is kind of it gets slow at times, but it's good that it gets slow. It tells a story. Blah blah blah. Whatever.
Second big thing.
People just like Vikings,
I
I
guess.
guess.
In this world is money. Mecha series are expensive to produce, not just because of the commitment of a high episode count as we just discussed, but because of the nature of the shows and the mechs themselves. Recent times has seen the rise of using CG to depict mechs, and as subjective as this may be, I think I speak for a lot of us by saying the new standard of CG robots are just less aesthetically appealing than the mechs of old, and have failed to capture the modern audience the same way Nightmare Frames, Arbalest, and Nearvash did for my generation.
I don't know
this
what
is
that
not
is.
to say that CG is a product of lack of
don't know what
funds.
that is.
CG mechs can look good and have looked good, but it seems like all the time, money, resource, and talent to make them look good are poured into OVAs now, which I suspect is to appeal to the hardcore fans because only they at the moment fuel the prevailing lifeblood of mecha. Merchandising. History has taught us that this genre lives and dies by merchandising, and the hot things now aren't gunplas. The patience and skill needed to build your own model kits
Yeah, I
cause them
only
to have a
see
much
like
higher
adults
barrier
doing
for entry
this,
than
like,
simply buying a figure of your favorite digitized waifu. It becomes a hobby rather than a casual purchase, meaning they end up appealing to the dedicated hardcore fandom as opposed to the mass audience, keeping them happy with high quality OVAs they will definitely appreciate instead of a big push to appeal to the casual viewer. Mecha, it seems, just isn't as profitable for a mass audience anymore, and in its place has seen the rise of new trends. Isekai, shonen, moe, slice of life all fit better in this modern landscape and make more money.
I don't see a whole lot of moe.
I think the most interesting thing to come out of this story is with the rise of idol shows, for as I mentioned earlier, you can see the early roots of idols sprouting from Mecha, and whether it's been AKB48, Idolmaster Xenoglossia, or Macross, the two genres have always been connected. But while the original Macross is more remembered for its mecha elements, the same is no longer true for the franchise, as Macross Delta's main fanbase interactions comes from their idol group. Hell, if we look at Studio Sunrise, the Gundam studio, the studio that thrives on its love for giant robots, we can see that it's not been Gundam that's been their money-making machine for the past decade. It's Love Live. Love Live is the property that has allowed the studio to thrive in the modern age.
I don't know what this is.
You heard it here first. Idols killed mech anime. This, of course, is all my own speculation from looking at the history, as there is no definitive answer for why it has happened. But whatever the reason, mecha has found itself in a sorry state compared to its yesteryears. And whether there will be something to reignite it back into its glory days, only time will tell.
I don't know. What about the future?
What could the future hold for this genre? It
Little
may be
known.
too late for a Gundam series to ever have the same level of popularity the likes of Wing,
The
C,
newer
or
one that
00
just came
did,
out
as the simple
seems
matter of
to
fact is, with
have
how
some
dense
push.
the history of Gundam is now, it's a very daunting franchise to undertake for new fans. Overall, it is still going strong though, and likely will always be around considering how symbolic it is. We'll just choose to ignore the fact that even Gundam has conformed to new trends now, with the next build fighters being based around a VR MMO. We can probably expect idols to show up somewhere as well. It's not all gloom though, as 2018 looks to be the most exciting year for the genre in a very long time. Darling in the Franxx is one of the most popular shows this season. Code Geass and Full Metal Panic are both getting sequels after over a decade, and
Oh yeah, this was a while ago then. This was a few years ago. Yeah. Darling in the Franxx, I haven't seen, but yeah. And SSSS Gridman, this came out like 2 or 3 years ago. Huh. Yeah, and I hear this was a good series.
Studio Trigger have even more mecha outings in the work. The genre is still very much around and could still thrive again. It's just waiting for that next big breakout hit to push it into an ongoing trend. Because
it'll
without
never
this,
die. It's
without
just...
that show that brings in new blood into the mecha fandom the same way Code Geass, Evangelion, and Gundam did before, it's likely the genre will fade more and more into obscurity. If that does happen though, if after all this it remains a shadow of its former self, it's a legacy that will never be forgotten. Its influence not only the culture of anime, but the culture of the entire nation of Japan, and considering its instrumentality in the evolution of the medium of anime is concerned, it is one of the most important genres anime has ever had. A look into the history of mecha is a look into the history of anime itself, and whether you're aware of it or not, whether you consider yourself a mecha fan or flat out can't stand the idea, it's very likely that some of your favorite shows wouldn't exist without it. Because the same can be said for me. I never really saw the big appeal to them. Sure, there were shows I liked, but nothing pushed me over the edge to fully dive into the subculture it created. Look, I like technology as much as the next guy, but calm down lads, it's just an oversized tow truck with legs. That was until I found myself standing in front of one in my latest trip to Japan. Here stood a full-size RX-0 Unicorn Gundam, 65 foot of pure awesome.
Yeah, well, now they have that one that actually moves around. That's even bigger. That's an actual full-size one. I actually want to go see that if I ever go back to Japan. That's a place I really want to see.
Watching these things on TV is hard to get a perspective of just how big they are, but actually standing at the base, looking up at this metallic Goliath towering above you, walking around, imagining the gravity of force that would be exerted if this 49-ton beast could take a step, marveling at the thought of a literal fucking building running at you, it dawned on me why these things had been such a big part of anime history, why they've been there from the very beginning, and why they've become so symbolic for the medium we all love. Giant robots are fucking awesome.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed the video.
I did. Thank you very much, Garnt. Thank you, Garnt. Yeah, Mecha. It's just not my thing. Yeah, but stuff like Big O and I guess Darling in the Franxx is supposed to be good. I've never seen it, and a bunch of other stuff that seems interesting that I would check out. Gurren Lagann. It's Gainax. Gurren Lagann's Gainax, so I might actually check that out someday. Yeah, so thank you all very much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and any suggestions, put them down below. I will. This is a suggestion from somebody in the comments. I can't remember exactly who, and I apologize. I've been doing that a lot lately, apologizing. So, yeah, thanks a lot, and bye.